Hello, Chris Buckalow once again, returning for what I might call an appendix to my previous video, which is, of course, a bit more additional information, historical information, relating to the previous topics, previous subject matter of my last video, which is going to be, once again, relating to the Lewis and Clark expedition. The fact that I also have, and it's not intended to sound boastful at all, but additional connections to other members of the Lewis and Clark expedition, or the Corps of Discovery as it was known. And these are individuals whose stories and whose roles in the Lewis and Clark expedition are pretty noteworthy, and that I think that I think in the future I would definitely be interested in creating other videos and other projects, as I've said, in the future, other things that these particular people would certainly merit it. And they are Joseph Gravelines, Pierre Dorion, and another man named George Drouillard, who was highly praised in the journals of Lewis and Clark themselves. Drouillard was I believe he was quite highly praised as a guide, and I don't believe an interpreter, but he had been hired on much earlier in the Lewis and Clark expedition, as opposed to Toussaint Charbonneau, who had been hired in North Dakota. George Drouillard was hired in, I believe it was Kentucky or Ohio or Missouri, where he had been hired, so further east, of course. And I believe it was in Missouri that Pierre Dorion and Joseph Gravelines were hired as well. And what's interesting to note about them is that they were sent by Lewis and Clark themselves back east from the Dakotas, I believe, from what is today the North and South Dakota, to journey all the way to Virginia to meet with President Jefferson himself, which they did. And I think it might have been at Monticello in what is today Charlottesville, Virginia, and in Washington, D.C. And he, having met with him, Jefferson entrusted them with a mission, ordered them to, and I believe actually too, they had brought Native Americans from North Dakota with them to, like a delegation, if you will, to meet with President Jefferson. And Jefferson then, during their meeting with him, authorized them to carry messages and greetings from him back to the Mandan Native American chiefs in North Dakota, which they did. And to make a long story short, it's quite a fascinating story that they were sent east from North Dakota to Virginia to meet with Jefferson, and then carried messages back from Thomas Jefferson to the Mandan chiefs in North Dakota, and then also met up with Lewis and Clark, with the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery itself once again as well. And so very fascinating story, and and definitely, as I said, merits further discussion and discussion in future videos. And for you genealogy, family history buffs who might have memberships to Ancestry.com or Family Search or things of that nature, it might interest you to know that some of the earlier, deeper lineage, which I think I did mention in a couple of my other videos. I touched on somewhat, but to delve into it a little bit more deeply, about the background of the Charbonneau family, they had originated near La Rochelle, France, which was an area of France in the mid-1600s that was embroiled in a lot of considerable religious conflict between the Catholic and Protestant factions in France, just as was going on in other parts of Europe at that time. And the excuse me, the year that they had departed, the year that they left France for North America, for New France, which of course at that time, would be Quebec, and a settlement that was known as Ville Marie, which would later be named Montreal in the mid 19th century, in the 1830s, I believe. But at the time that the Charbonneau family embarked from France to New France in North America, it was named Ville Marie, and was a French settlement where there was, I believe, some Jesuit activity, missionizing the Native Americans in Canada as well. And so the Charbonneau family, the progenitor, the pater familias, you could say in Latin, was a man named Olivier Charbonneau, and his wife was named Marie Marguerite Garnier, and they and some other relatives and a grouping of other people embarked in a former French naval vessel, which was named the Saint-André, which I believe in the English language would be St. Andrew. And it had been a former French naval vessel, but that had not been sanitized. Oh, well, former French naval vessel that had served as a French naval hospital of sorts, and then was not sanitized before the voyage across the Atlantic, and as a result, a number of people died during the voyage to Canada, and I believe that Olivier Charbonneau, upon reaching the settlement and settling within that settlement of Ville Marie in Canada and New France, I believe he constructed a grist mill or a windmill, and then he became, the progenitor of the Charbonneau family in Canada and later in the United States. And going on from him, there was just trying to think about the order of this, the chronology of it. There was a Joseph Charbonneau, who's my direct ancestor, like my 8 times or 9 times great grandfather, who had taken part in something which I touched on in one of my previous videos as well, something known as the de expedition, where Enrico, or Henry de Tonti, who was a Neapolitan southern Italian explorer, navigator, I believe, who was working in the service of France, he and a party of Frenchmen from Canada went to search for and to seek out the explorer La Salle, and then it had gone on, down the Mississippi River, and then had gone on to found the Arkansas Post, the first Christian European trading center, trading settlement in the lower Mississippi River Valley, in 1686. And so this ancestor of mine, and he's also he's family to Toussaint Charbonneau as well, of the Lewis and Clark expedition, had taken part in that. And then he later took part, this man Joseph Charbonneau, with his brother Michel, in the founding of, or was one of the early settlers in Detroit under the Sieur de Cadillac. So that's the Charbonneau family had quite a history and a family tradition of exploration and exploration and being voyageurs and traders and explorers and so forth long before Toussaint Charbonneau took part in the Lewis and Clark expedition in the very early 1800s, because of course this is going back to the early 1700s and then 1686. So it's quite a story, quite an interesting story, and just wanted to add all this once again as kind of an appendix, if you will, added additional information to my previous video, and that's about it. So I will see you guys in the future, or speak to you in the future, and probably be a little while longer before I record another one, because I think I've recorded enough content for a little while. So, but I will get back to you at some point in the future. Have a good night.